This is you. You're sitting in a cramped underground basement surrounded by the hum of heat press printers and a chemical ink smell so pungent it makes your eyes sting. Flickering fluorescent lights on the low ceiling cast a cold, soulless glow over the space. Before you lies a freshly completed passport, smooth paper, a watermark shimmering under the light, and a hologram reflecting a rainbow spectrum identical to the real thing. You lift it, tilting it slightly under UV light. Every security detail is perfect down to the micrometer. This passport will lead a man you've never met to a country you've never set foot in, with an identity that has never existed in this world. And that man will pay you $30,000 just for this thin piece of paper. You set it down, pull off your rubber gloves, and look at your hands under the lamp. Long, precise fingers, not a single millimeter of tremor. But if you went back 2 years, these hands only knew offset ink and cheap printer paper. You were just a poor printer, struggling with rent on a deserted street where your shop had few customers besides some low-rent flyers. So how did the hands once stained with common ink become the golden hands sought after by the entire underworld? 2 years ago, your small print shop was tucked away in a row of decrepit houses on the city's outskirts. Walls yellowed with age, an old printer creaking every time it ran, the smell of mildew lingering in the stagnant air, and a stack of unpaid electricity bills growing taller on the corner of your desk. You were formally trained in printing techniques, having studied graphic design at a prestigious technical school. You understood every type of paper, every ink mixture, every operating principle of industrial printers. But talent wasn't enough to support a family in a market where everything was going digital. Customers dwindled. Income shrank while your wife was pregnant with your first child, and the hospital bills were inflating like a balloon about to pop. Night after night, you lay on an old bed, the ceiling leaking water rhythmically into a plastic bucket in the corner, staring wide-eyed into the darkness, not knowing how you'd pay for your wife's prenatal checkup tomorrow. One evening, as you were about to close up, a man walked in. He was dressed professionally. Hair neatly combed his cold eyes, scanning the entire shop's equipment with expert appraisal. His expensive cologne overpowered the old ink smell of the store. He didn't beat around the bush or introduce himself. He just placed a folder on the table and spoke directly. He needed you to make exact replicas of these documents so perfect that no one could tell the difference. You looked down. These weren't ordinary commercial papers, but government-stamped invoices, certificates of origin with security barcodes, and transport permits with official signatures. They were all genuine, and he wanted you to turn them into templates for forgery. The price he offered for this batch was 10 times your monthly income. You looked at the papers, then back at the stack of unpaid bills. Your conscience stirred, but your wife's pregnant belly stirred harder. You accepted the first batch with a hesitant lack of confidence, but when your hands touched the samples and began analyzing the minute detail, something inside you woke up. You realized that duplicating a watermark wasn't just photocopying. It was a battle with every paper fiber, every drop of ink, every pound of pressure from the press. You spent the entire night in the shop doors, bolted curtains, drawn tight eyes, glued to a magnifying glass, hands adjusting the color of each ink layer until your back grew stiff from sitting too long. You tried dozens of times each time, discovering a tiny flaw that a normal eye might miss, but you couldn't accept. Finally, at 4 in the morning, the final print emerged so perfect that even you couldn't tell the real from the fake. You sat stunned by your own achievement, both terrified and proud of what your hands could do. The man returned 3 days later, picked up the documents, scrutinized them under the light, nodded without a word, and placed a thick envelope on the table. The money inside was enough to pay off all your debts and buy a new printer. He left, but before crossing the threshold, he turned back and said something you would never forget. Don't let these hands get dirty with cheap ink anymore. From today, they were born to redraw fate for those who need to disappear. In the following weeks, customers began to appear. Not people coming for business cards or flyers, but unfamiliar faces talking little, paying much. They came at night, knocking on the back door, never using real names, never leaving phone numbers. The requests became increasingly complex, from commercial invoices to medical certificates, then to driver's licenses and residency permits. Each new order was a step deeper into the darkness of crime, but each step was also paved with thick stacks of cash. You started investing in specialized equipment, ultra-high-resolution laser printers, industrial heat presses, hologram stampers, and the most advanced version of graphic design software. You rented a secret basement under an old building, turning it into a production workshop with its own ventilation system to avoid chemical smells being detected. You installed 3 layers of door locks and a surveillance system that automatically wiped data every 24 hours. Your child was born healthy, your wife no longer had to worry about money. You bought a new house in a quiet neighborhood, got a car, and started a savings account. From the outside, you were a successful printing businessman. But beneath that polished veneer, your hands were creating ghost identities for people you didn't know and didn't want to know. Your reputation spread through the underworld like a slow-burning fire. They called you the Golden Hand because not a single product of yours had ever been detected at any border crossing in the world. You developed your own techniques, a method for recreating security holograms. Using purple lasers combined with a special polymer film, you formulated yourself after hundreds of hours of testing. You studied the paper used for passports in every country, learning to distinguish cotton fiber components, synthetic threads, and durability additives. You even created a secret database containing thousands of samples of seal signatures and barcodes from government agencies worldwide. Every product leaving your workshop was a work of art so perfect that even forensic experts would shake their heads in frustration. But the better you became, the deeper you were sucked into the bottomless vortex. Your customers were no longer small-time corner cutters, but kingpins of transnational human trafficking rings. They needed your golden passports to create facades of elegant businessmen or reputable tour guides for their network of henchmen. Thanks to those perfect fake identities, they could travel freely directing human shipments from the shadows without ever being flagged by Interpol. You knew the papers you created were paving the way for horrific crimes, but you chose to close your eyes because each order now paid a fortune. One night, as you were finishing a new batch of passports, the television in the workshop aired a report on a large-scale human trafficking bust. Police rescued 17 women and children, locked in a shipping container at the harbor, exhausted and terrified. The images of long lines of emaciated victims with hollow eyes made you shiver. But what truly made your heart stop was when the police displayed evidence seized from the ringleader arrested at the airport, a passport in the name of a successful businessman. The camera zoomed in on that passport, and you immediately recognized a tiny detail in the hologram, reflecting light at a 45-degree angle. That was your technical signature, something only you possessed. Your perfect passport had helped this monster wear the mask of a decent man, casually crossing dozens of borders to manage the imprisonment of those 17 human beings in that dark container for months. Those exhausted faces on the screen seemed to look straight at you, accusing you of being a silent accomplice through your very talent. You turned off the TV, but that image haunted you like a ghost. That night you returned home, looked at your young daughter sleeping with an innocent smile, and realized that every time your hands performed a miracle, they might be chaining another rope around the necks of those poor children out there. You decided to stop. You contacted the first man, the one who had pulled you into this world, and announced that you were closing the shop. His reaction wasn't sympathy, but a suffocatingly long silence over the phone line. You could hear him breathing slowly, steadily like a predator, considering where to deliver the fatal bite. Then he spoke, his voice calm, but cold as steel. You know too many faces, too many names, too many networks. No one leaves this job by simply saying goodbye. He gave you 2 weeks to reconsider, and before hanging up, he reminded you that he knew exactly where you lived, what time your wife went to the market, which kindergarten your child attended, and even her favorite seat in the classroom. You sat motionless in the workshop, hands trembling, the phone dropping onto the cold concrete floor, realizing that you hadn't just sold your soul, you had placed your family into checkmate. You couldn't sleep for many nights, your mind racing to find an exit. Every time you closed your eyes, you saw the faces of the children in the container and your daughter's sleeping smile alternating like a horrific film reel. Finally, a reckless idea took shape. If you couldn't leave in the darkness, you would create your own light. You began secretly copying all customer data, every order, every face, every fake identity you had ever created over the past 2 years. You encrypted it all onto a secret hard drive using 3 layers of military-grade encryption and hid it in a location known only to you. Simultaneously, you continued taking orders as usual to avoid suspicion, but quietly embedded extremely subtle flaws into the product's defects invisible to the naked eye, but the specialized scanners at border crossings would recognize instantly. A security thread shifted by 0.5 millimeter a barcode, missing its last 2 digits. A hologram slightly hazy at an angle only a scanner could read. You were playing the most dangerous chess game of your life, using your own craftsmanship to take down the empire you had helped build. You made anonymous contact with an investigative journalist who had written extensively on transnational crime and arranged to meet at a suburban cafe where there were no surveillance cameras. Everything collapsed faster than you could have imagined. One of the sabotage passports was detected at a checkpoint earlier than expected. The person carrying it was apprehended and gave up the source after only a few hours of interrogation. The news traveled back through the network at a breakneck speed. The man didn't call this time. Instead, 2 unknown faces appeared in front of your cover printing shop in the morning, standing motionless across the street like stone statues. You recognized the death signal and immediately urged your wife and child to leave at once. No luggage, no explanations. But as you rushed back to the basement to destroy the evidence, the door burst open. 2 giants blocked the way, and behind them was him, with a gaze so cold it made your skin crawl. There was no greeting, only the dry sound of him spinning his phone. He uttered a single line before his men knocked you unconscious. "Welcome to the end of betrayal." They didn't kill you. What they did was far more cruel. They turned you into the perfect scapegoat. Before moving in to neutralize you, they had silently prepared a massive criminal file using your own exclusive printing techniques and seals to create an undeniable trail of evidence linking the ring's most horrific crimes directly to your real identity. When you woke up from the crushing blow, the basement was a smoldering pile of ashes, but a few golden folders had been left behind intentionally in the most conspicuous spots to make you the sole mastermind in the eyes of the law. Before vanishing into the shadows with their new identities, they left one final gift, an anonymous call to the police. When the SWAT team swarmed in, what they saw was not an innocent printer being held captive, but the scene of a notorious forge master failing to destroy evidence. You looked at the cold handcuffs locking around your wrists, realizing with horror that you had forged your own cage. The weapon you had sharpened for 2 years had now become a life sentence, pushing you into a pit that no watermark could save you from. The prison gates closed completely, cutting off the bright world outside. You spent your remaining days in late-night regret between 4 grey walls and faces of guilt. Your wife had taken your child far away, changing their names and erasing every trace of you to protect her from the hunt of both the police and the underworld. Night after night, you look through the iron bars, imagining the smile of your daughter, who has now grown up without a father. You have become a ghost, in the truest sense erased from the lives of those you loved most, yet looming large in international criminal records as an indelible stain. The hands that once created thousands of new lives for others now cannot even write a single letter to your own child. You hollow out in the darkness, realizing that the end for one who tries to redraw fate was a preordained destiny to exist as a mere number in the system, solitary and forgotten, exactly like the ghost identities you once so proudly created.